Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening for our talk with Schalk and myself on some very exciting new things we can do with select dropdowns in native HTML and CSS. As usual, a couple of thanks to our sponsors. That's NML, a software development company in Cape Town, and IO, also a software development company that works more in startup spaces. They've been sponsoring us for a long time, and they let us keep the lights on, so to speak. We've got a couple of other meetups coming up. Please, you can find all of the details on that if you join our Discord. We'll pop the link in the chat. And to the format for tonight is Schalk's prepared some really nice slides for us on just explaining the history of the select and where we started and where we are now. And then after that, I will show some code examples that I put together on how we can start using these new things today. If you have any questions, please just post them in the comments, and we will deal with them as they come in. So anytime you have something to, any question that you'd like to ask, just pop them in the comment. They come through to us in the studio, and we will show them on the screen. Okay. All right. Well, thanks again. And I'm going to hand over to Schalk, who's going to take us through the first part. Thanks, Schalk.
I had to find my StreamYard in between like 5 million different tabs. Wait, let me just organize things on this side. And I assume you can see my screen, right? Okay. So you can hear me all right? Okay, you are muted, but I assume you can hear me.
Yes, all good.
I am so paranoid after the last session. So for some reason, like it only started recording in the middle of the session, and so we lost the entire first half. So I'm just so paranoid now. I'm just like, okay, is everything working? All right. So, but yeah, let's get into it. So I'm quite excited for this one. I've been wanting to do this one for a while now. There's a lot of really exciting stuff coming down the pipe in terms of CSS. I think this is one of the ones that people underestimate the most. I think once you start unpacking it, like you kind of realize it's a really big like addition, and yeah, that's why I also want to take some time just like contextualizing it. So basically, I just want to chat about kind of the history of the select element and kind of the general understanding of the select element, because I do think that between select elements and maybe the date selector, those are kind of the ones where this tension between this idea that, you know, the operating system controls the way you interface with the browser, and actual people that build websites and stuff wanting to have control over those inputs, you know, kind of this tension, like you kind of find it the most here. And it's interesting, and it does seem like, you know, there's been a very long precedent of like you can't actually apply CSS to these things, where it does seem a bit of a different direction is now being taken across the web in general. And I'll chat about that a bit some more, because I do think, you know, we're going to talk about the select element, but I do feel this is like the tip of, it's a very important part, but I think it's the tip of the iceberg. Like I think this is just like an indicator of a really big shift that is busy happening, and then we're kind of like at the precipice of something really big in terms of kind of how we use the web and how we like create forms and stuff on the web. So yeah, so I want to talk about three approaches, three ways of understanding kind of the select element. So I start with this slide. I probably have 5 different talks that have this exact slide in, and I think it's quite important, because it's very hard to make sense of the web without really understanding why there even is a web, and why it was created. Because you do find like that kind of ripples through all the way to where we find ourselves today, and for reasons that I'll also unpack a bit. So But yeah, basically, so this is Sir Tim Berners-Lee, effectively the guy. Ooh, this is actually wrong. I only realized this now after like probably using this slide now for 3 years. Is he's not the creator of the internet? He's the creator of the web. Um, Very important distinction. Whoops, no one has ever corrected me on that. But all right. Okay. And this is the very first website he ever created, which is effectively what is the World Wide Web. And it's still around. You can go to this. You can go to this URL, and it is still going to be there. This is the very first website that was ever created. It works exactly how it was meant to work. Nothing is broken, and except for like the HTTPS thing, you'll see the little like not secure at the top. But otherwise, and I think this is phenomenal. Think when you think about something like like let's talk about like Windows 95. Windows 95 came after this, and think how many things that were created for Windows 95 still actually works. And even if you can get it to work, whether it just works out of the box, and this kind of backwards compatibility of the web it's something that's like really extraordinary, but it's also a double-edged sword. And so the goal of why the web was originally created, kind of this idea of this sending data in the form of pages around on the internet, was very much kind of, I think, akin to what we would consider something like Wikipedia today. It was primarily to share documents, and to kind of edit and make revisions to other people's documents and so forth. And Sir Tim Berners-Lee worked at CERN, which is kind of like the nuclear research institute in Europe. And so the idea was like this would just be to like share research papers from all across the world and so forth. And you do actually find a lot of the like kind of marks of that still in the document. If you think about like the DOM, the document object model, you have headers, you have paragraphs, all of that like talks to this idea of a page and a document. And so initially, like kind of this is kind of the historical precedent. The historical precedent is that the web is purely a medium to deliver content. It's not meant to actually be something where you can create software on. It's purely meant to be like something that delivers content. And so what this means is that effectively the idea is that you don't get to have absolute control over how people interact with the content. You just supply the content. So like if we and as mentioned, this is this, and I apparently can't spell compatibility. Geez, this presentation isn't going well for me. But yeah, so we have this radical approach to backwards compatibility, which is like nothing that was ever created since the inception of the web, if you come back to it in 40-50 years, it should still work. Also, Justin, I'm just gonna like leave it up to you to stop me if there are any questions.
Yes, we'll do.
Okay, but so like there's a book for me that really captures kind of like the sentiment, this historical precedent that I'm talking about quite well, and that's a book called Cascading Style Sheets: Designing for the Web, in 1999. I'm not gonna pronounce the first author's name. But like him and Bert Boss. But so effectively, I think this is a really great time machine to get a sense of kind of what the general mind share and sentiment was around the web like before 2000. And because I think a lot of that still echoes in our HTML and CSS that we use today. And like there's a really great excerpt from this book that effectively talks about this tension between people that create websites and want control over how people use their websites, and kind of this historical precedent of the web as purely just something for content and not for interactivity. And like so it goes along the lines of like meanwhile writers of web pages were complaining that they didn't have enough influence over how their pages looked. One of the first questions from an author new to the web was how to change the font and colors of elements. So I think even back then, this was a very disputed thing. Like, should you be able to change the color of your text and fonts and so forth? Which is something we kind of take for granted now. Just to kind of show kind of how deep this kind of sentiment used to run back then. And so they highlight an excerpt from no one other than Mr. Mark Andreessen. I'll get to that in a second. From a mailing list in 1994 that kind of shows this tension between kind of like the desire to control how people interact with your site and actually the desire of kind of this historical precedent and of browser vendors and so forth to actually not allow you to do that. And so, like Mr. Andreessen, in his classic, very abrasive manner, kind of responded to someone say in that newsletter saying that, the fact that you can't change your inputs and you can't style your inputs and so forth is not a bug. It's actual rendering choice made by the browser. So he's behind kind of one of the first really popular browsers called Mosaic. And he mentions you can't control what your documents look like in HTML, and kind of then goes over, just like smack talking people, but then effectively like ends with, the thing is, like, what does he say? He has to continually tell hordes of people who want to control what their documents look like in ways that would be trivial in Microsoft Word and every other common text processing environment. Sorry, you're screwed. So this is very much kind of like the sentiment is that you just deliver content through the web. You don't get to control the ways that people interact with it. And this kind of like effectively kind of initially drew kind of like the battle line in terms of this. And you find these competing tension throughout the history of the web, leading all the way up to today. Because effectively, browser vendors want to do two things. There's an inherent tension here. They want to adhere to the HTML spec, but they also want to add cool looking stuff to the browser. Because at the end of the day, browsers are competing with one another. And if your browser can do cool animations and stuff, people are going to use your browser. As opposed to, I promised I'm not going to badmouth Safari in this talk. So as opposed to some other browser that barely supports anything. Yeah.
Don't worry, Schalk, I am.
Okay, cool. Yes. The browser that might or might not be Safari, that you actually have to force people to use it. And they don't have a choice because they can't actually install another rendering engine on your iOS device. But so there's this inherent tension between, the standardization process and the quote-unquote boring part of the web and the foundations upon which that is built and adhering to that, and then also wanting to have cool stuff that makes your browser kind of like more appealing compared to other browsers. So for a very long time, because there was this precedent of, like these things like date selectors, inputs, all these things were the domain of the operating system, and you could install them with CSS. That like there was kind of this idea of, okay, cool. Given that that's a fact of life, can we build on top of that without requiring that to become extensible? So the first thing that kind of like people thought about and browsers thought about is kind of this idea of vendor prefixes, which in retrospect turned out to be a really bad idea. But, like if you were doing any web development, let's say 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, like vendor prefixes were the thing. They were like hot, man. And so effectively what vendor prefixes are is they're kind of like namespaces that each browser has to be able to add their own custom stuff on top of the existing like CSS and so forth that would only work in their browser. So you might have seen these before. They're often like dash WebKit or dash MS or O for Opera or Moz for Mozilla, which would be Firefox and so forth. And they kind of give the browser a little playground to have people try out experimental stuff and so forth. So in short, browser vendors used to, and I think the key here is used to, because we kind of realized it was a very bad idea. Used to add prefixes to experimental or non-standard CSS properties, and developers could experiment with these ideas. In theory, this helped to prevent these experiments from being relied upon in actual production-facing things. But so effectively, like, because it's experimental, it can be removed at any point, or it's not standardized and so forth. But as things go, people ended up using this stuff in production, and we have all these vendor prefixes in production. We even have tools like auto prefix and so forth that automatically add vendor prefixes to your CSS. So yeah, we gone goofed up as the web community. Like we kind of did the exact opposite of what was meant to be vendor prefixes were meant to be used for. And like there were some good cases. So for example, here is the early transition experiments that WebKit, which would be Safari, and Firefox did in terms of how transitions might work and so forth. You'll see they have two different ways of doing it. The Firefox one allows you to set like ease or ease in or so forth, whereas the WebKit one only like kind of allowed you to only set the time and like what to animate. And so that was a very nice kind of like cow path to the standardized transition that we have today. So there were cases where this actually worked out quite well. Like browsers could experiment with things, and then like you could start seeing where are some common things that browsers are doing, and kind of like then standardize that and draw upon the ways they tried to do it, and like kind of things that they thought were important and so forth. But that's kind of actually the minority of what ended up with vendor prefixes. Like it just started getting out of control. Like browsers started adding stuff like WebKit, box reflect, below 5px, font feature setting, backdrop filter, orient, box reflect, touch callout, text security, disk. It's just like effectively like browsers were just creating their own version of CSS on top of the existing CSS. Yes.
Yeah, and those wild Microsoft filter to create gradients, and just completely nothing to do with the spec whatsoever.
Yeah, and like the early Flexbox stuff. Like I think a lot of people were trying to still prefix the early Flexbox stuff, and then at some point we just gave up because it was just so different from what ended up happening with. And I think also this MS Grid one here like precedes actual CSS Grid by I think like 10 years or something, if I'm not mistaken. It does.
Grid was a Microsoft proposal, yeah.
And it was actually before Flexbox even, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
But like this was like, this was an absolute clown show. And globally today, kind of vendor prefixes are considered to be a bad thing, and are discouraged. Not to use them, but for browsers to actually use them as a means to experiment.
If I can just say something else quickly, Schalk, on how ridiculous that got. So Firefox used to have the Moz prefix.
Yes.
And eventually Firefox started supporting WebKit prefixes.
Yes. So that was also another thing, is like, it's like I think that was also one of the criticisms against vendor prefixes, is like if you were like a smaller browser, then now you had to support all this other crazy stuff that the big browsers were doing, with their crazy like V8 and rendering engines and stuff. It just got wild. But like as Justin said, like it got to such a point where people were expecting Firefox to support experimental stuff from WebKit, that WebKit just included experimentally in their own browser. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, so that's why we can't have nice things. And select is no different. We had some stuff specific for select. Appearance, which actually similar to that transition example I showed, actually ended up kind of like materializing into something really like standardized. But then we started getting like Microsoft expand specific stuff, and lots of weird stuff where you could influence the little arrow thing in the select and so forth. Yeah. Not only that, even just regular stuff, like stuff that you could apply on the options, was inconsistent between browsers. So not even vendor prefix stuff, like regular stuff, like applying styles to an option that is checked. Some browsers supported it, some didn't. So select was all over the place, even without vendor prefixes. Yeah, and that's not even speaking about just the different ways that browsers actually render like dropdowns themselves. It's like even between, like, if you were to look at Windows, whatever, it's just like even between different versions of Windows, it's so different, and it's even different sizes, not even just styling, like it's the actual height and stuff is different. It's wild. Yeah, so like, and as mentioned, I think select is just like a little tip of the iceberg here. You find this across the board. Like select is a little microcosm, but like date selectors, file uploading, and so forth. And like, so the situation that we find ourselves in with vendor prefixes and stuff just started getting out of hand, and it was compounded by the problem actually ended up being bigger than just select, and like this adherence to radical backwards compatibility, and a very strong established precedent of actually not doing that. So it kind of went against the actually what was considered best practice on the web. Vendor prefixes were abused, and that's not even talking about assistive technologies. Not even like screen readers, or what happens if you increase the font size, and because these things were technically experimental. So who the hell even knew what would happen like on assistive devices? So clearly this wasn't going to a good place, and then this wasn't sustainable. So I think what we then generally saw is we kind of started seeing people go for kind of the nuclear option, which is just like get rid of select and option and all of that, and just build your own select. Okay. And like, I really don't actually blame people, because trying to navigate this nonsense is, good luck. And there are some really good examples of this. But the thing is, what you'll often see is most examples of where people do this is like really very bare bones, doesn't take basic accessibility into account, doesn't actually, take basic semantics into account and so forth. But there are proper ways to do this. This is a really good example. It's not my own, where you can actually see here, so so there's a button, and the button has all the aria labels. Is it expanded, is it not expanded, does it have a pop-up, what's its role? It's a combo box. Can I move this to the side? No. Yeah, and you'll see credit to the author of this. They really kind of understand kind of all the semantic implications, and they're using aria tags and stuff in a correct way. Majority of people didn't, but you could, and but look at all the CSS, and look at all this JavaScript just for this. Okay. That's a lot of work if you want to do it properly. So you're kind of stuck between inconsistency or consistency, but at the cost of just a lot of engineering work. So you kind of sideline all of that browser nonsense and just build your own one. but so what ended up happening is kind of we started seeing abstractions around this. So you would have, for example, Material UI or ShadCN or even like good old Bootstrap have their own versions of all of this low level stuff. That just takes into account all the things like you should be able to navigate with keyboard, you should be able to use your arrows to move up and down, and so forth. And it should announce to a screen reader, okay, this is open now, and you should be able to clear your selection after you've selected it. If you submit this in a form, like it should actually send it as form data, and so forth. Yeah, so but so they had their own APIs that you had to work with, and now you're kind of finding yourself in the same place again, where you get to customize it, but you also get to customize it in the manner that the abstraction allows you. So not really. You just have a different way of customizing it. Yeah. So I think this is kind of where we are at this point in the story, at least in terms of the average developer. I don't think the average developer really is keeping up with kind of everything that's been happening in CSS over the last 2-3 years. I think we're seeing the same type of thing that we saw with the advent of ES6, where a lot of people are still using jQuery and whatever, like even like a decade almost after ES6 really became production ready. So I think this is going to take time to proliferate, but there's already a lot of like actual native tooling that like gives you way more flexibility, way more control, and is way more elegant than you get with these abstractions. Like no shade on these abstractions. Like I use both ShadCN and Material UI quite a lot. But I do think there's a lot of like really cool tools coming down the pipe in native CSS that's way more powerful than what we can currently do with these. And then I think this is kind of the third approach. And then I think we're kind of like at the precipice of this, like kind of at the start of this journey where there's a big reconsidering of this precedent that you shouldn't be able to style like these interactive controls. Most of this is led by what is called the Open UI Working Group. So the Open UI Working Group it's a W3C community group. And they're very specifically focused on things like checkboxes, dropdowns, radio buttons, date selectors, all of these things, and being able to style them. So they're really pushing for this. And, you can probably tell this is kind of going against the grain of what was held as best practice for a very long time. In 2021, they kind of released CSS Basic User Interfaces Module Level 4 specification, which a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now that you're able to do with select and so forth came from the specification. This was the kind of a big drop in terms of giving us some preliminary tools to actually apply our own styles and stuff. Cool. The big one is select appearance. Okay. So first things first, there's a standardized CSS property that allow you to just override and get rid of the user agent styling. So it removes all the styles that Windows or like OS or Linux or whatever applies, or the browser applies to that native element. It just says like it's almost like a CSS reset, but for like actual native elements. And you can apply this on anything. And then this came from this like specification. And this is kind of, I think, like almost universally supported. Let me actually see. I don't know if you know what the support is for this, Justin. Can I use appearance? None. If I can spell. Yeah. I obviously IE. Yeah, so like this is pretty what we're at. 96, 94. Okay, so quite a lot.
Yeah, for about 5 years now, I think.
Yeah, like it got
About around
released
that.
in 2021. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, and so this kind of revisited this idea of like preventing people from styling native widgets, and kind of like kind of reconsider whether there is a more inclusive like compromise, um, in terms of, okay, maybe you don't allow people to style I don't know, a heading that it looks like a select element or something, or style a select element that it looks like an image or who knows what. But like maybe within the parameters of these semantic elements, like there are some hooks that can be exposed for people to hook in their own styles and stuff. Um, yeah, and this is mostly thanks to the work done by this Open UI group. One thing to mention, and Justin and I actually spoke about this before we started, is that um, the it is worth noting that a lot of people on this Open UI group have ties to Google, or actually are actual employees of Google. Um, Google is throwing a lot of weight behind this. Depending on how you look at it, you might also be saying that Google is steamrolling some of the stuff through the standardization process, like cutting some corners and so forth. Um, I don't know. I don't. There's one side of me that doesn't really like that. Um, but there's another side of me that is like, man, it's 2025 and we still don't have tabs, actual real working tabs in the browser. So it's like, obviously I don't know how well what we have is actually working in terms of processes. And I think also like I think Google's approach here is also a bit of a response to what happened with PWAs, where they kind of try to get everyone on the table and like have everyone be on board for PWAs, and you know kind of there was a lot of deceit and subterfuge by Apple and so forth, and sabotage and so forth, and I think to the detriment of PWAs today. um, we might have been in a much different place today if Google kind of was as forceful then with PWAs as they are with kind of like a lot of this CSS stuff now. So I don't know. Uh, we'll see what happens. But there is some general concern just how much Google is indirectly, I don't want to say directly, but like indirectly or in some places directly involved here. So it's just something to keep in mind. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. Um, okay, cool. So let's quickly just look at some practical stuff. I just want to show some stuff. I don't want to go too deep into it. Justin has prepared some really nice stuff. He's created an entire repo of examples, so I don't want to kind of take away from that. But so on the left hand side here, if you actually have your you can set your browser's dev tools to actually show the shadow DOM of elements. By default it doesn't, but if you do set it, like you can actually drill down into the native styling of things and so forth. So obviously, so select has like a shadow DOM, like it's wrapped behind the shadow DOM, which is why you can't style it directly. But you can go into it in the DevTools, and you can actually then see here on the side. Where's my finger? Over there. Like all the styles that get applied, and you'll see then that little corner there at the top. It says User Agent Style Sheet, which means like this is actually the styles that get applied directly by the browser and the operating system and so forth. And what you can do is if you pass appearance none to it, you just like wipe all of that. Like, you'll see even that on the right hand side there over here is the overridden one with none, and then just like the default one. And you'll see it even removes the arrow, it removes everything. So that kind of gives you a base. Like now you can work, now you can actually just do your own thing without like the actual built-in browser styling and stuff interfering. So that's cool. But like there's a third approach as well. So you don't have to go like give me the default styling. from the operating system or give me nothing. There is something called base select as well. And what base select does, it's kind of like if you think about kind of like none as a CSS reset, base select is kind of like normalize. So it's kind of like the normalized CSS. Depending, like it kind of feels like, man, like nowadays, like that's starting to get into like prehistoric, like it's web, like I don't know how many developers nowadays even know about reset and normalize and all that stuff. But so effectively it doesn't just wipe everything, it kind of just gives like a baseline with some of the basic stuff that you can extend. And currently, if you want to do a lot of the stuff, you need to use base select. If you want to do a lot of the custom stuff, it actually, interestingly enough, doesn't work with none. And I think the reason being because base select is technically applies a per browser specific like styling to it, whereas the default one is the operating system. So if you use Chrome and you select a date, it's going to depend more on what operating system you're using as opposed to what browser you're using. Whereas I think if you say base select, it bases it on what browser you're using and not your operating system. So I think that also allows the browser, that now allows the browser specifically to give you things to hook into. Okay. So, but like what you're seeing here is basically just if you do none, you'll get the middle one. If you do base select, you'll get the one there on the side. If you're using Chrome, I don't know what it looks like in Firefox and Safari and so forth. Okay, so, but this is all cool. But the real magic, and this is the secret sauce here, and this is why we're doing this talk, because like this was, as Justin mentioned, you could do this now for about like 5 years already now, although not a lot of people actually did it, but you could. But like this recently dropped, and you'll see there's full support in Edge and Chrome. There's partial support in Firefox and Safari, but it is standardized. It's not experimental, so they are probably going to ship support pretty soon. And I probably imagine this is something that they would want as well in their browsers. So I can see them prioritizing this as well. This is a big thing. But yeah, so this is, but like in any Chromium based browser, like this works 100%. So let me show you a very basic example. And so a lot of this is powered by this new thing called the selected content tag or HTML element. And like it also works in a progressive enhanced manner where it just falls back to the default select behavior if selected content is not supported. But let me just show you. So here's a basic code pen. We'll zoom in a little bit. Okay. How do I get that back? Oh, I clicked there by accident. Okay. So what I have here is I have a select. Okay. And in that select, I have my options. Okay. So if I were to, can I edit this? Crap. I should have set it so that I can edit it. Can I go? Okay. I'm not going to show this right now. I'm wondering whether I should. No, I'll leave this up to Justin. But so basically, I have, so this selected content, this takes whatever is in the option and it just clones it in there. Okay, so if you select this, it just takes this DOM node and it just clones it. This is like a slot. If you work with slots, and like web components and so forth. Or you can think about like React, like children almost. This is a placeholder for whatever you have selected is going to be inserted there. So you can do some really cool stuff. So obviously, so what I have here is I have option, and you can say smart or smart. You can say heart or smile. Okay, but what I do then is when it's in here, I use a CSS selector to remove the label when it's inside here where the selected content gets placed. So if you look at the CSS, I use my regular select. So I say in selected content, like if there's a child label, just display none. So the label gets shown down here, but if it's inside there, So in other words, inside the selected content, then the CSS rule applies that just removes it. So you don't get the actual labels in the selection. I also do another thing where I do the opposite. So I just have a little select transform here as well, where I actually use a has to see if, so you'll see on these options, I just have an ID smile and an ID heart. So then I just say, if the thing inside selected content has an ID, if there's an ID of heart in there, or if there's an ID of smile in there, make the background red or make the background yellow. So the select actually the entire select changes color based on what you have selected. Okay. This is really cool. It looks like absolute like dog poop, but like it's just like in principle this is so cool. Like you can think about like if you just extend this, and I could have been actually way smart, and I could have probably actually set this to data or to the value. I could have said if the value is, oops, I didn't even actually put values on my options. But if the value was like heart or the value was like smile, so you can do some really cool stuff here. To the point that you can even go as far as that it's indistinguishable from an actual select, but it's using the select like semantic things under the hood. Here's some way cooler examples. So this is Adam Argyle. So he has some okay, one thing to note as well, like this example that I showed here, there's no JavaScript. This is just HTML and CSS. This is wild. Okay. It's like just this little bit of HTML and like this little bit of CSS. There is some JavaScript on here, but I think he just what he does is he just console logs what you select just to show that the value actually pulls through. And also he just checks for support. Let me just see class list toggle. Okay, he just has a CSS class that he toggles if appearance-based select is supported or not. So this is just like, this is not related to this. It's just some extra like nice things. So his is a bit more complicated. But also his example is quite a bit more complicated. But you'll see here he uses select content as well, and he's options. He's wrapping his options here and so forth. The CSS. So here also base select. It's not doing anything that complex or clever or so forth. Yeah, just like basic. But like, so the result is obviously, check how nice this is. And this as well, and check it actually kind of sizes as you go. Check, he's also kind of like separated this here with like different types. And check, this is sticky there at the top, so as you scroll, how cool is that? And yeah, and so forth. So these are some really cool examples. You can check it out, and also like obviously tabbing, so completely accessible tab, shift, check this as well. How cool is this? Okay, this is all just like, there's some stuff here, and this is just to console log what you select and so forth. This is all just plain HTML and CSS. So what's also really cool is, you don't have this problem where if you have JavaScript, if your things are JavaScript powered, and you load the HTML or whatever, someone's like clicking, click, 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 and nothing happens. And then only after 3 seconds, now they can use that. Looking at you, Off Zero. Off Zero loves their dashboard. They love that. No, I don't say they love to do it, but like it's just annoying. Like there's so many things there where you like can only start interacting with it after like 3 seconds or whatever. This is a cool one by Una Kravitz as well. So, Bitcoin or whatever. Also, accessible. So I could go like, and so forth. Now this one's a bit more straightforward. Also uses selected content. And so for CSS, you'll also say here base select. And here is actual vendor prefix. I actually don't know what this one does. Curious. Small control. Okay, last one I'll show is really cool. Like, check this out. Okay. Once again, you'll see there's no JavaScript here. It's just HTML and CSS. Check this. How cool is this? Potion selector. And once again, you can tab, space, tab, space, shift tab, up, down. So I'm navigating this as if it is a select. Check this. If I go shift, I can go into it, out of it. If I do tab, it goes out of it. So I use my arrow keys to move up and down in it. I use space. Okay, and you'll see it's actually semantically. And what's nice about this, there's actually not that much like actual, for what you get, like there's actually not that much HTML and CSS. Cool. So this is about the point where I hand over to Justin to show us some examples. I just do want to mention that the OpenUI working group has a Discord where they kind of chat about this stuff and kind of organize and so forth. There's a lot of cool people on there. Yeah, I'm on there as well, so I kind of take part in some of the discussion as well. And also very conveniently, you'll see just below that in my Discord, there's this little pink thing with FedSat that has some notifications. If you aren't on our Discord, also consider joining that as well, where we kind of share notifications and stuff when talks are about to happen and so forth. Yeah. Are there any questions, Justin, before we go into your examples?
No questions yet, Scott.
All right. I'll just take it that people's minds were so blown that they're trying to figure out what to even say.
Well, you're right. Look.
Also, hi, Shay. But like, it's always like when there are no questions, it's one or two things. It's either like you did a really good job of actually explaining it, so there's no ambiguity and people don't need clarification, or you just explained it so badly that people have no touch point to even start formulating a question. So,
well,
but yeah,
for what it's worth, I think you explained it really well.
I hope so. It's just like, for me, like this stuff is like fascinating. Like, to me, there's a lot of YouTube stuff on there, like that kind of just show you, oh, add this CSS, add this CSS, add this. And like, I guess that's cool, but like my brain works in a way where I'm like, firstly, why are we only getting this in 2025? Like, I need to understand why. And and also, why was I told my entire life that you're not allowed to style this, and now all of a sudden you are allowed to style this? Like, what's going on there? So yeah, I find this stuff fascinating. I kind of find these big tectonic shifts in the web like really fascinating. Whether other people do, I don't know. But yeah, over to you. Like, let's get into the actual flashy part.
Thanks, Scott. I've just prepared a couple of demos where I'm just going to show what these properties do, and we can look at how they affect different select elements and also across different browsers. To be the bearer of bad news, this isn't supported at all in Firefox or Safari. It's only in Chromium-based browsers at the moment, but Safari are working on it, and it's already in their technology preview. I mean, sorry, Firefox, Mozilla. Safari, I have no idea. It's almost impossible to actually find out what Safari is working on.
That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not working on it. It's just like that. Who the hell even knows what? No one has any idea what they're even doing.
They are a closed book. Yeah.
But for what it's worth as well, this is like super fresh in Chrome.
Yeah.
So
it is super fresh.
It's not like this. This has been baseline like now for like 3 years or whatever, and other browsers aren't like implementing it. Like, so we'll probably see that drop pretty soon. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So I've just done. Let me zoom in here a bit.
Yeah. Also, maybe make it full screen and move us down or out of the picture or whatever.
Good point. How's that? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I've just got two selects here. These are just, I've done nothing to them. They're just, this is what we get out of the box, and this is in a Chromium-based browser. This is Arc. If we look at it in Firefox, you can see, let me zoom in there as well. You can see the appearance is different. Yeah, as Schalk mentioned in his slide, I'm opening this, I'm on a Mac. I'm opening this in a different browser. It's rendered differently. And then, of course, Safari has to go and muddy the waters completely by doing it like that. And then as soon as you zoom, changing the Chrome. So Apple, great. So, but the option list across all the browsers is pretty much the same. Yeah, it's an overlay. It covers the select item that's on a Mac and Windows slightly, and then of course on Windows it's rendering differently. Yeah, so we have no compatibility in terms of appearance across browsers. Okay, right. So just something else to note here. I have these are labels that are hooked up to my select, as they always should be. You can see if I click on my label, it's adding focus. That's great. But we should just note here that both the label and the select item are rendered in the browser as inline block elements. Yeah. That's why they're next to each other, and they always will be next to each other. If you want to have a label above it, you've got to wrap them in containing elements, or you've got to do display blocks and all that kind of stuff. I prefer a different method, and that's just to go display flex with a flex column. And that's going to give us our label above our select, but it's going to do something else as well. And it's going to now make our element as wide as its container, because that's how our flex works. Now we could go and do flex shrink and all that kind of stuff, but that's pretty painful. So I just like to do width fit content. And there we go. It's not going to fit our content. So that's just a couple of things on like form layouts and how these work. When we start to apply these properties to parents and things, they are influenced by those choices, and we should be aware of those in terms of our design. Something else
for those that don't know, what does fit content do?
Fit content says make this as wide as the content inside it, but don't ever go any bigger than that. Yeah, max content does something similar, and min content will actually say make this as small as you can. Yeah. So min content, if you have things that are a lot bigger, I put an example in here. Here's a much longer option. You'll see that min content isn't affecting this because nothing is wrapping, right? There's no text wrapping in selects or options. If we have an element that wraps, min content is literally going to break that option 4 is longer into 4 words underneath each other. Option, new line 4, and so on. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to fit. And we can see here we've got one that's longer and one that's shorter, just because we are letting the sizing appear as we want. Okay, so Schalk mentioned appearance none. So I'm just going to show everyone what that actually does in the browsers, and you'll see a couple of things are going to happen. So I can go appearance none, and you'll see here we are in Chrome. We've got, there's no padding anymore. The border is just black. Oh, no, it's dark gray, sorry. And our option list is not affected at all. And our focus is still there and so on. But now we've got the arrow is gone. There's no indication that this is in fact a dropdown. It could be anything. So as Schalk mentioned, that's not really anything that's not really something that we want. Yeah. Now, what we can do in CSS is we can go and use pseudo elements like after to add a drop-down arrow and position it absolutely, but you're ending up with miles of CSS to do that. And to my mind, it's actually not worth it. And let's just let the browser render it as it should, because then you're getting all the values that you should out of the select. So appearance none, as Scott mentioned, isn't really a solution here. Yeah. Okay, something else just to notice in terms of, and this applies to all form inputs, they do not automatically inherit your body font. Yeah, so here I'm just using Avenir because it's installed on my Mac, but this is being rendered in the browser sans serif font. You can see it's different. Yeah. So if you want to do that, you can just do font family inherit. Now that would probably go in your reset or your normalize or whatever. But yeah, you can see it's now adopting my chosen typeface. But I'm just going to get rid of that because there's something interesting that happens when we go to our new appearance property. Okay, so there are a couple of things that we can already do on the select with plain old CSS. So we can say background white, and you'll see now that's on Apple Safari. It's not that blue is gone now, yeah, but it's still using that Chrome thing. So you actually have to do this. If you just want it to be plain white, you have to do WebKit appearance none, which is annoying because WebKit appearance none, as opposed to appearance none, doesn't remove the arrow. Okay. Thanks, Apple.
Oh, really? I didn't know that on Apple.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's right.
I didn't know that.
It just removes that gradient. Yeah. Okay, we can also add padding, which is useful. There I've just added 8 pixels or 0.5 rem, but notice that it doesn't respect the right side. Yeah. So even though you can add padding, that drop-down arrow is still going to be positioned there in Chromium. And what's happening in Firefox when we change the background is the border becomes an inset border, and it now gets this weird beveled look. So not great, but that's fine. We can also change the border. We can just do that. And now we're starting to get like selects, with the exception of Safari. No one uses Safari anyway. But we're starting to get like similarities, yeah, that we didn't have before. And then, you know, we could just go and add a border radius, for example. And we've got some like rounded selects. That's Chromium, that's Firefox. And they look the same pretty much, yeah. And our drop-downs are fine. So that's great. I mean, just for some quick styling to make something look a little bit more interesting, you can add background, you can add a gradient, you can do quite a bit with just those basic CSS properties. Yeah. Okay, whereas if I have those properties and I put back appearance none, I still have them, but now I've lost my arrow that's indicating it's a drop-down. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to leave this standard select alone, and we're going to move on to this one. And I'm just going to go through those properties that Schalk was talking about, and with the examples he mentioned there. So I'm just going to, so in our HTML here, I've just got an ID. I just used IDs because I just wanted to target one at a time. I've got my label. It's all properly set up structurally, semantically, nicely in the HTML. We've got values and so on. So I'm going to take that single select and I'm going to do two things. And I'm going to take my single select and I'm going to take my picker select and I'm going to change my appearance here to base select. I'm just going to uncomment all of these and then we'll go through them one by one. Okay, so we must also apply base select to picker select if we want to do some additional styling on our options. Yeah. I'm adding a transition because I want to target the picker icon when we click on the select. And then I'm just adding a hover and a focus, which we should always have. And then we've got our picker icon here. And that's our little drop-down arrow that we have in our select. And I'm going to give that a color. I'm just making it gray. And then I'm adding that rotation for our transition. And when it's open, we're going to rotate it 180 degrees. So we're just going to flip it around. Yeah.
You might have also noticed over here that if you don't know this, like you'll see Justin isn't actually using transform. He's just straight up like calling rotate as a property.
Oh,
which
yes.
is also
Sorry.
kind of quite a new thing as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Quite a new
which
thing.
Is really, really cool.
Yeah. Supported everywhere. You don't need to go transform and then the type and then blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Something else you may have noticed I'm doing here, this is plain old CSS and I'm nesting things. I don't normally use this, but I just wanted to group everything together so it was more readable on the screen. Yeah. I'm not a huge fan. But yeah,
I do like the fact that you can do that with media queries now.
Yes, that is very nice. Yeah.
Yes. But like same as you, I tend to try and keep my specificity really low. So I also tend to not do this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is horrible. Yeah. I've got an ID and then I'm chaining pseudo elements.
You're
and
just going to have to important your way out of that.
States and attributes. And do not look at this as like right CSS like this.
Yeah, it's one step away from important.
exactly. Yeah, as I say, I just wanted to keep them all like grouped so we could see, okay, this belongs to this particular item. Yeah, and then on our select, I'm just taking away the border, and now we can target our option that's inside this, and now this is interesting. I'm saying display flex here, so we can now start applying all these properties to our options that we could never do before. Yeah, and so I'm giving it some nice properties just to give it a nice layout, and then I'm adding a border, a background, some padding, and also a transition for hover and so on. And then we can use all of our CSS properties that we use anywhere else. We can now apply to options, which is amazing. So here I'm using like a negation and a last of type, and I'm saying, okay, if it's not the last of type, give it a border bottom of none. And this is really great because we couldn't do anything like this before. Okay, I don't want to know what the specificity is inside an ID. Anyway, let's go back to our example. And here's our new select that we have not changed. Now, first thing I want everyone to note is I haven't had to set font family inherit on this. As soon as I changed my appearance, it is now inheriting the font family. Yeah. Whereas this one, you can see, is not, because I switched that off. Yeah.
And that's for me where it really clicked that base select or select base actually gives the styling to the browser, whereas
yes, exactly.
Whereas like the default behavior gives the styling to the operating system. So by default, it would actually use your operating system font. So if you've gone and set your operating system font to Comic Sans or whatever, it would actually show Comic Sans in there because it's like a little portal. Like there, it hands over styling to the operating system. Whereas if you use the new appearance, it keeps it within the browser. Yeah, which is really cool.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so we haven't done much there. It's like 20 odd lines, perhaps. And there's our hover state with our transition. Nice. We've got our, we've changed the color of our icon. And when I click that, the icon's going to rotate with a transition, and we're going to get our option list. And we've got our borders that are appearing nicely. And this tick is automatically added, yeah, which is a new thing. We never had that before. So now we're getting a visual indicator of what is selected, which is another great thing. And we can do cool stuff with that visual indicator as well, which I will demonstrate in my next example when we get to it. So if I now go and select this, it's going to show me option 2, my icons rotating nicely back, and we are in our focus state. And of course, this is completely keyboard friendly, tabbable. All the accessibility tree APIs that we have for a normal select are retained. Yeah, we still have those within our select, and we can use our keyboard to do that. Now, Schalk spoke about the shadow DOM. So if we do inspect this, and let me just bump this up, you can see here as our select, let's get that there, and here's our shadow root. So I'm exposing the shadow root because I've said, please show it to me. And you can now see, as Schalk mentioned, what we've got in here. So we've got a div with aria hidden true. So that's not read out. And you can see here's our user agent style sheet. That's now being applied to all of these things.
I also really appreciate that it actually uses the popover attribute in the shadow DOM. That's really cool seeing that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I'm going to talk about in my next example, because we can hook into that for animation. And also slots, yeah. So these are all now being put in as slots, and in the slot here is our select button. Yeah, there's our picker, which is now open. Yeah, and you can see there's our top layer. No, I shouldn't have done that, because now we're getting into the weeds of all the SVGs. But there's the popover. Yeah, div popover. So the popover is a new API. That is in all browsers now, and can be used. And that is now being, the base select is using that now. Yeah. And within that, we've got our preview text here. So very cool what's going on here. You can see here we've got our options, and our options are now have got all our styles being applied, which we couldn't do that before, except a couple of things in some browsers. Yeah. Now, what's very interesting to me is our option is actually rendered by the browser as a flex item. We don't need to do display flex. Yeah. You see, I've got a gap here. There, my gap's off. And I've got justify start. If I had to do justify end, I don't know if that's going to work. Center. Anyway, but my flex gap is being applied, etc. Even if I turn off display flex, if I turn display flex on and off, there's no change. So that is actually rendered by the browser as a could find it somewhere, I'm sure. But it's rendered as a flex item. Yeah.
Might need to go deeper.
Yes,
but
definitely.
So I mentioned like the popover thing, and like I think this is what's so cool to me is like this is all just browser primitives.
Yes.
So like up until this point, like things like dropdowns and whatever were kind of almost like very foreign things that were just inserted by the operating system into like a little slot, whereas now it's actually built with browser primitives directly.
Exactly. Yeah. And we're seeing more and more of that. As something gets built as a browser primitive, it is looked into how that can be utilized as to enhance something else. Yeah. It happens in CSS as well, where we, with like is and has and so on, using, building on APIs that already existed.
Yeah. I'm back in a second, but you can continue.
Okay. All right. So I've got a final example here where I've added a lot of additional stuff. This one's called the fancy select. And what we're doing is we're doing a payment selector. So let's go through it. Again, I've got my ID, and then as Schalk demonstrated, we can add this button with our selected content, and that is going to show whatever we have selected in the top of our select. So I've got a first option. It's just an instruction, yeah? And then I've got a bunch of additional options. And what I have in all of them is a span with a class of icon. I'm giving that an aria hidden true so that the screen readers don't read it. And then I'm putting in an SVG. Again, this is stuff you just could not do before. You couldn't add like an icon or anything to an option in your HTML. It would just not render. Yeah. So I've got an SVG there, and then I've got another span with a label and the name of that payment provider. And the rest are all the same. Yeah, I'll just collapse these SVGs. Of course, you could reference an image via a source or whatever, but inlining SVG is great because it takes up very little space and there's no request. And then I've just wrapped this in a form, yeah, and I've got a submit button. And I just want to demonstrate validation. So I've just added a required attribute there. Okay. So if we look at the CSS, here's something. Okay. So I'm saying for this one, I'm saying, okay, we only want to do this if the browser supports a particular selector. And I just find the picker icon is the easiest one to do because you don't have to chain like appearance and all of that. It's just like, does it select having a
And I think it's also the newest edition.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So it's a good litmus test. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm doing my appearance base select. That's our building block. Yeah. And then I've got background colors. I'm giving it a min width just for some uniformity, max width, max content. I'm taking away the border radius. I'm adding padding. I'm making it display flex. Again, nice. We can do that. I'm aligning my items to center. I'm giving them a gap. And then I always like to give a select a height, just so it's uniform, even more uniform. Yeah. But that's optional. Yeah. Depends what you want. And then now I can target my picker icon. So the picker icon is our little arrow, our drop-down arrow. So we can actually go and target that. And it works just like before or after, and it has a content property. Yeah. So I'm just calling an SVG there. This is not best practice, okay? Because you got to do a request for that. And I'm calling another one when you open it. Do not do this, just for demonstration purposes. Like
you need to use an emoji, huh? That's what you need to do. Put an emoji in there.
Yeah, you can. No, you absolutely can.
Yes. I have to say I've tried. I've literally I've tried to push this. Like there is some stuff you can't do. I can come out. I can just straight off the bat say you can't put videos in your options.
No, definitely do not.
Like the browser doesn't allow you to do that. No.
Now our select, when we change our appearance to base select gives us another pseudo class, and that is open, which is from the popover API. Great. So we can say, okay, when it's open, let's do something with our picker icon. And, I'm just swapping it out here, but you could rotate it or whatever. Yeah. Okay. All right. Then I'm going to my picker select, and I'm just adding my appearance here again. I could have chained them at the top, but I didn't want to mix styles up. I'm giving it no border. And then I'm using another thing that Schalk and I spoke about, anchor positioning. So I can now use anchor positioning because if a browser supports this, it supports anchor positioning. Yeah. I don't need to do another check. I know that that is the case. Yeah. So say, okay, well, great. Now we can position this wherever we want to in relation to the select. Yeah. Animation, I'll come back to. Yeah. My options, I'm saying again that I don't need to do that. I can actually leave that out. I just put it in to indicate that we're doing that. We're aligning center. We've got a gap. We've got a border. We've got some padding, and we've got a transition for our hover. And now that little tick that gets added, it gives us another pseudo element, and that's our check mark. So we can put in our own custom check marks, and I've got my own SVG for that. So I'm going to add my own custom tick. And because that is aria hidden true, it doesn't matter if we change the order in the flex, because it's not going to affect the accessibility. So I'm making it order 1 and then margin left auto, which means the tick is going to appear on the right instead of the left, which is the default.
This is cool. So the order 1, that moves it to the right because it's the flex direction is row. Oh, that's really cool.
Right. Yeah. Okay, and then I'm just again doing my not last of type, remove the border, because otherwise we have to. Yeah. Okay, then. Okay. Yeah, some stuff. Actually, let's skip this for now. I'll come back to that. That's a bit of a mouthful there. But yeah, there's our selected content, which Schalk demonstrated earlier with the emoji selector. Here, this is what appears in our select after we make a selection. I'm just making it that color, and I'm displaying it flex, aligning it, and giving it a gap. So there's a nice layout there, because I'm pulling in both my SVG icon and my text. Yeah. And then my icon, I'm just vertical, align, middle, height 32. That's not important. Okay, so how does it look? Well, there we go. Actually, let me just go and comment out those other ones, so we can put this at the top. Okay, so here's my new select. As you can see, I've got my custom drop-down or chevron. Yeah, you can see my name is now appearing because I've given this a name, and that's appearing when I hover, which is a great accessibility thing. And when I click on my drop-down, I now have please select a payment option, and I've got my SVGs for each of my payment methods and the name. And you can see here my please select a payment option. There's my custom tick that I'm now using with my check mark, and it's on the right because I have changed the order. So if I go and select MasterCard, you can see there we've got our icon with that. And if I open this now, there's our MasterCard. It's selected, and I've also highlighted it by changing the background. Yeah. If I go Apple Pay and we come back, we can see each one is highlighted with those selections.
And this would take a lot of JavaScript previously.
Tons.
If you wanted.
Tons. Yeah. I mean, this is why things like ShadCN and MUI exist. And if you look at the components and how they're built, that's a lot of JavaScript. Yeah. Which then, of course, has to be parsed and rendered and converted through the DOM, shadow DOM, and if you're using React and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, this is just there. But how do our other browsers look? So let's go to Firefox. Hey, it's not too bad, right? We don't have the nice option list, but this is a perfectly fine solution. It looks nice, it's clean, and that's because I used my supports. Yeah, and this is working exactly the same way, and there's nothing wrong with that, to my mind. Okay, if I try and submit, Firefox is going to tell me you've got a problem, and that's how browser built-in forms work. If I go to Safari, we've got, yeah, it doesn't look great. Yeah. But I'm also going to get my, this cannot be done. And if I go to my, my styled select and I try and submit it, I'm still going to get my validation warning. And of course, you can style that as well, like you normally do. So we're not losing anything. If we were doing this in JavaScript, we would have to accommodate for all of these things. Is this required? What's the error message? How do we display it? Where does it go? Etc., etc., etc. Okay. Now, because this is using the popover, we can also animate it. Sorry, let me just go back to that section I skipped. Yeah. So here, if I just comment this out and we look at it again, we can see here, when I open it, it's got this, actually, is it that one? Sorry. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you had that blue background previously.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, let me just explain what's happening here. If I just do option checked, then when it loads,
the default is going to be blue. Yeah,
exactly. And we don't want that. Yeah. So I'd want to remove that from the first one. So that's just going to be applied to our other ones. And then here as well, for hover and focus, if I remove that, the hover and focus is also a standard thing. We don't want to be hovering on this first one because it's not selectable. Yeah. So we can, again, just remove that. On our first of type, we can say hover focus, like just inherit the background color and the cursor. Yeah. So we don't have, we're just distinguishing that that's not a selectable item. Yeah. Which if we go to our Firefox one, you can see there, it is selectable, but not valid because it has a value of 0. So that's not a great user experience. Yeah. It's fine. I mean, people will be able to use it. But here, with CSS, we can really turn this into a properly usable, extremely friendly select.
And it's also worth noting, as previously said, that is right now. You might be watching this video in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and like it might be a completely different story.
Exactly.
Who knows?
Exactly.
Like as mentioned, Safari and Apple is kind of like a black box. Who knows what's going on there? They might just come out tomorrow and say like they're shipping full support for this now.
Yeah. Next release. Oh, by the way,
they tend to do that. Yes.
Yeah, they do. And also, if you wrap it in a supports, you don't need to worry about future proofing it because that's always going to be applicable. Yeah. You are future proofed. Yeah. Yeah. So animation. So because this is using the popover, we can do a couple of things. We can say, let's do opacity 0, and then I'm just going to transition all 0.6, allow discrete. And this is a very important keyword. that combines all the transition properties into a single one. Yeah. And if you're not aware, we can now transition between display none and display block, which is what's happening with the popover. It's display none to display block. This is no framework. This is just plain old CSS. Yeah, you don't need anything else. No frameworks required.
Yeah, listen to that guy.
Yeah, this guy knows. Okay, so if we look at it now, oh, it's not showing up because I've made the opacity 0. Yeah. Okay, fine. There, it's back. Because now I'm saying when it's open, let's do opacity 1. And then but the animation is not great. You can see it's kind of flickery and yeah. But to fix that, I can add a starting style. And this is an at property, which VS Code doesn't even know about.
Yeah, it saves you from having to do animation just for a once-off thing, to set up like
Exactly.
entire keyframe animation just for something you want to use once off.
That's right. And now we've got a nice smooth opacity fade in animation. Yeah, that's, I think, about it.
Ah, great stuff. Like, I really like this example. I'm actually thinking of like looking at this now. You can probably do something cool with the country selector as well, with the flags and stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Which is always something that kind of used to be quite a pain. Yeah, I'm really loving this. What?
Yeah, country selectors. Yeah, you're using JavaScript for that 9 times out of 10.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
Here's a GitHub repo, and this is also deployed to Pages. I just need to kick off the deployment. I've just updated this. I'll put the link in the chat. Feel free to do with that what you wish. Don't do any PRs because I will be ignoring them.
Can I add some
downloads? But fork downloads, do what you wish. Let me take my screen away. Here. Yes, that's right. There are no other elements in there. I put some SVGs and spans and things inside the option, to add the icons. But if you just want text in there, you don't need to touch it. You can just do your same old options as you normally would and style them any way you like. Yeah. So it's just select, options, close select, and you can apply all the styles.
Yeah, so there's no unordered lists or whatever.
Nothing.
Yeah, which is what people tend to do when they're using JavaScript and so forth. Yeah.
I wonder what the rules are on what you can put inside an option, because a span is fine.
I've tried. Like there's some things like you also can't put like I tried to do like when you hover over it that it like scales. Yeah, that doesn't work. I wanted to, as you scroll, if your mouse like the options just like pop as you so no, there are some limitations. Also, everything inside, I think the technical term is inert. I think everything inside selected content is inert, meaning that like it's just like you can't interact with it. So
yes, not selectable.
Yeah, so you can't put buttons that do other things in there and so forth. Like it just has the regular like behavior. in the options, and then everything inside that tree below it is kind of like just disabled. Yeah. Yes, and that's the
Yes.
point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, 100%. So that's the point. The goal here is to kind of give people not only ways to customize with just plain CSS, but like tools to actually customize in ways that we haven't even been able to with like frameworks and stuff before. So this is really
Yeah,
exciting
that's
stuff.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, yeah, you
Yeah.
can like if you just go on YouTube or whatever, you'll find a ton of stuff. There's a ton of like videos
And,
and tutorials and stuff out there. Yeah.
and CodePen as well. There are lots of nice
Yeah,
examples on
CodePen.
CodePen. And
Yes,
there's
yes,
also
yes.
the what's the Google blog dev, web dev.
Mm.
There's a
Also, just like check out like Adam Argyle. Like he just has tons of stuff around like cool new stuff in CSS.
yeah, he's got an article on exactly this with links to
Mm.
CodePens and
There's also like there's a couple of like comprehensive like resources as well. I know there's like a um, custom select explainer or something that really covers everything. Yeah, like there's a lot of really great resources, which is like something that's really cool because I think a lot of people are really excited about some of this new stuff. So like the moment it drops, like you just have like all these tutorials and resources and stuff out there. Um,
yeah.
yeah, I'm hoping we see the same with the temporal API as well, with dates JavaScript. That I'm hoping also when it drops, like there's just going to be tons of resources out there. But yeah, okay, cool. But yeah, that was a lot. Like you said, like that's it. But like that's an hour and a half. But yeah, like my
Oh
hope is
gosh,
that
sure.
yeah.
I didn't realize the time had
Yeah,
flown
no,
like
tell
that.
me
Yeah.
about it. But like, I hope this gives you guys an appreciation for just like how significant this is.
Mm,
Um, and I think we're going to be doing a lot more of these. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of big changes. Uh, I think
mm.
the next one is definitely something like the file uploader and so forth. Because the current file uploader is the native one. Yeah, and
Horrific.
yeah, like I mean, like if the open UI working group had their way, like they would you'd have this level of control over everything from date selectors
Yeah.
to whatever.
Mm.
So I'm super excited to see where that goes. I think the it's been very well received thus far.
Yes.
So I can't really see that they're not going to capitalize on that and really try and um, give you this level of control over all types of user inputs.
Mm.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
cool. But
Exciting
yeah,
times.
thanks so much, Justin. That was like really cool
Yeah.
seeing those
And thank
examples. Yeah.
and thank you, Scott. That was great. Great
Mm,
intro, and his history lessons are always good. I always enjoy
yeah.
them. Yeah, this is how it
Yeah.
was. This is the way we went, and now we're trying this. The
Yeah.
story of the web, right?
I need to restrain myself a bit because like I really enjoy that. But like I know like a
Yeah.
lot of people are like, I just want to see how to use the thing. But I'll
How
put
do I do it?
timestamps
Yeah.
in. I'll put timestamps in and you guys can skip to that. Yeah, you can skip the history
Okay.
lesson. But I find that super interesting.
Me too. I find
Yeah.
it really fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where we've come from. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. All right, cool. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Okay. Thanks,
And
everyone. Thanks for joining.
yeah, and
And
then see you guys at the
yeah,
next one.
join the Discord to keep up to date with all the events. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Bye.